unit, I will be talking about NAAC methodology. This will be a relatively short unit because I do not plan to go into the process. I just want to indicate what is the process and what is the mechanism. Now, please take a look at this slide. I want you to focus on IIQA in the second line. I want you to notice SSR with reference to the second point. And in the third point, I have indicated triple S. And in the fourth point, there is DVVD. And the next line, there is SOP. Okay, so if I explain these terms, then I think it is enough. Okay, now I would, with reference to this particular slide, I would like to talk about what is the process of A and A. A and A stands for assessment and accreditation. Okay, fine. Now we are in the month of June. Probably by July or August, the new academic year would begin. Now, how do students join a college or a university? So the first thing they have to do is they have to submit an application. I want to join BA English. I want to join BCom. I want to join MSc Life Sciences. So therefore, the first thing that they have to do is they have to submit an application. In the same way, an institution, whether it is a college or a university, whether it is an autonomous college or an affiliated or a constituent college, they have to submit an application, and that application is called Institutional Information for Quality Assessment, IIQA, and that is the first step in the process of assessment and accreditation. Now, the second major one is SSR. Now, SSR should be a mantra for you, self-study report. What is the self-study report? Now imagine you are an MPhil student or you are a PhD scholar. At the end of your research, you submit your MPhil thesis or your PhD dissertation, which contains all your findings. Okay, so SSR is like that. SSR is equivalent to a PhD thesis, but of course on a larger scale with a lot of magnitude. So SSR is self-study report. Okay, so after a college or a university submits what is known as IIQA, the next step or the next procedure is to submit SSR. And what is SSR? It is a self-study report which talks about the 7 criteria, the various key indicators, and the various metrics, both qualitative and quantitative. Now, simultaneously, another process is set in motion, and that is called Student Satisfaction Survey, SSS. So 10% of the students of a college or a university or an affiliated college or an autonomous college, NAAC directly contacts them through email, and they have to fill in a questionnaire, and this questionnaire is very simple. Why do I say it is very simple? Because the questionnaire is already available in the NAAC website. There are 20 MCQs, there are 20 objective questions, and there is one subjective question. So it is open book. The questions are already available in the NAAC website. So NAAC will directly contact 10% of the student community or the student population, and they will be administered this survey. So they will have to answer the 21 questions, 20 objective type questions and 1 subjective type questions. That is called Student Satisfaction Survey, and this is handled directly by NAAC. And this is supposed to be confidential. But the questions, the 21 questions, 20 plus 1, they are already out. And the marks, the weightage for student satisfaction survey varies from 50 to 60. In the case of universities, it is 50. In the case of affiliated and constituent colleges, it is 60. Now, as the process is going on, there is something called DVV, data validation and verification. I'm sorry, I have put data verification and validation. It is data validation and verification. Now, earlier, when I talked about metrics, I said there are 2 types of metrics. We have qualitative metrics and quantitative metrics. A qualitative metric describes a phenomenon or describes an event or describes a facility, whereas a quantitative metric quantifies and presents numbers, presents data. Okay, fine. Now what has happened is NAAC has employed a third party, and that third party will verify and validate the quantitative data that you have submitted. For instance, a particular institution claims that there are 300 staff members, and out of the 300 staff members, 295 staff members have PhD degrees. Okay, so this is quantitative data, and this quantitative data, this metric needs to be verified and validated, and this is done by NAAC, not directly by NAAC itself, but it is given to a third party. Now what happens is there should not be a deviation. What the institution, the data that the institution has submitted and the third party's report, they should match more or less. There may be minor variations, not that the variations are allowed, that NAAC will contact you with the report of the third party, and NAAC will tell you there are some deviations, please explain or please clarify or please submit your data. Okay, so now what is important is the student satisfaction survey, the DVV, data validation and verification, and the SSR, they all happen simultaneously. Okay, and in the process of DVV, there is something called pre-qualifier. And in this pre-qualifier, the institution has to score 25% on each criterion, and this applies to quantitative metrics. Now, the analogy that I can give you is, as I said earlier, when a student wants to join a college, he or she should submit an application. And in most institutions, there is an entrance test, and you have to clear the entrance test. You have to secure minimum marks in order to become eligible. So the pre-qualifier is something like that. Now, once the process is over, what is the process? IAQA has been submitted. After that, SSR has been submitted. Student satisfaction survey has been completed. Data has been verified and validated, and all the mismatches and all the gaps have also been filled in, have also been addressed. So now everything is pakka. So now the peer team will visit. In the case of colleges, it is a 3-member team, and in the case of universities, it is a slightly larger team with 5 members and sometimes 7 members. And this peer team will look into only the qualitative metrics, because the quantitative metrics have already been verified and validated by a third party. So therefore, the team that visits the college or the university for an on-site inspection, they will look only into the qualitative metrics, and ultimately the results will be declared by NAAC and the certification will be issued. So this is the most important slide as far as the third unit is concerned. I want you to remember terms like IAQA, SSR, SSS, DVV, and SOP, standard operating procedure, and all these procedures are available on NAAC website. Okay, so this is about student satisfaction survey, how it is carried out. Please go to the third one. There are 20 objective type questions, MCQs, and 1 objective type, and 10% of the students will be chosen for this survey, and it will be directly handled by NAAC. Okay, now we come to the second part of the third unit. How are the scores calculated? Okay, when a student writes an exam, he or she wants to know how the paper will be evaluated, what is distinction, what is first class, what is second class, and when does he or she fail. Okay, so how are the scores calculated with regard to NAAC? I want you to pay attention to this slide. Now, the scores are derived from 3 sources. Source number 1, system generated scores, and this is with reference to quantitative data. After the data validation and verification is over, the system will generate scores, and this applies to quantitative data. Then student satisfaction survey, the weightage varies from 50 to 60. Then peer team visit, qualitative assessment. This is like a question paper consisting of part A, part B, part C. So you put together and you have the cumulative results. I just want to give you 2 samples because you should know how exactly the scores are calculated. So I have two samples. So this sample talks about how the score is calculated for a key indicator. The following slide will give you an idea of how the scores are calculated for each criterion. So this is only a sample. Now you look at the first column, it talks about the metric. So this is with reference to criterion 6, and criterion 6, we are focusing on 6.2, a key indicator. The title of the key indicator is strategy, development and deployment, and the weightage that is allotted for this particular key indicator is 10. And there are 3 points: 6.2.1 perspective plan, 6.2.2 organogram, 6.2.3 e-governance. So 6.2.1 is, look at the second column, it is a qualitative metric. 6.2.2 also is a qualitative metric, whereas 6.2.3 is a quantitative metric. Now the total weightage for this particular key indicator 6.2 is 10, and that 10 is divided as 2, 4, 4. So 2 plus 4 plus 4, so that would be 10. Now, how are these scores actually calculated? Now, the scores are calculated on the basis of a 5-point Likert scale. I repeat, the scores are calculated on the basis of a 5-point Likert scale. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. At one end of the matrix, you have 0. 0 means very poor, not at all satisfactory. Okay. Then at the other end of the matrix, you have very good, very, very good. So that would be 4. So 2 would be average. In other words, 0 would be very poor, 1 would be poor, 2 would be okay, average, fair, 3 would be good, and 4 would be very good. Okay, now let us do the calculation. For 6.2.1, an institution, let us say, has prepared the perspective plan. It is okay, there is nothing great about it, there is nothing extraordinary about it, so it is only average. They get 2. So 2 into 2, the scores they have got with reference to 6.2.1 is 4. Now, whereas in the case of 6.2.2 organogram, the institution has prepared an organogram showing the hierarchy of the positions and the authorities and where they stand. Okay, so therefore, it is good. Okay, so in the 5-point scale, it is good. So therefore, the calculation is 4 into 3, 12. Whereas e-governance, the institution has just started implementing e-governance and they have a far way to go. So therefore, just 1. So 4 into 1, 4. So therefore, for the key indicator 6.2, which is strategy, development and deployment, the actual score is 20. Okay, so I repeat, the scores are calculated on the basis of the 5-point Likert scale, where at one end of the matrix you have 0 and at the other end of the matrix you have 4. Now, the previous slide talked about the calculation of the scores with reference to a particular key indicator. This is with reference to a particular criterion. So this is at a slightly higher level. Okay, so criterion 7, the title is innovations and best practices and the weightage is 100. There are 3 key indicators: environment consciousness, the weightage allotted it is 30, innovations, the weightage is 30, best practices, the weightage is 40. Okay, so how has that particular institution performed on a 5-point scale? With reference to the first key indicator, it is good, therefore 3. With reference to innovations, it is just average, so therefore it is 2. With reference to best practices also, it is just average 2. So therefore 30 into 3, 90, which is a good score. 30 into 2, 60, average. 40 into 2, 80. So totally 230. The weightage allotted for this criterion is 100. So therefore 2.3. What is the CR GPA? GPA is grade point average. Grade point average for this particular criterion, criterion 7. So 2.3 is the criterion wise grade point average. Okay. Now please look at this slide. So ultimately when the results come out, once again I go back to the analogy of the student writing an exam. Okay, he or she gets, let us say, 75. 75, let us say, is first class. If he or she has scored 80, that would be distinction. Of course, this varies from institution to institution. Now, in the case of NAC, the highest grade is a double plus. Okay, so the range is 3.51 to 4.00, and A plus is 3.26 to 3.50, and A is 3.01 to 3.25. Okay, then if an institution scores below 1.50, then it is not accredited. Okay, so dear friends, that marks the end of the third unit. So in this third unit, there are two things that I have explained. Number one, I have talked very briefly about the process of accreditation, and I explained some key terms like IIQA, SSR, DVV, SSS, SOP. So that was the first part of the third unit. And in the second part, I gave you an idea of how the scores are actually calculated, and I did it with reference to one key indicator and one particular criteria.